Are you sitting comfortably?
Yes.
Then we'll begin.
I was gonna start with a roast, but
Go on then. Start with the roast.
not content with trying to sell his book on one podcast, Dale has dragged me and Aaron along to try and sell it on this special one-off.
Let's try and shift a few copies.
Well, fingers crossed, anyway. Aaron and James have very kindly agreed to present this extra little special, which is, yes, dedicated to my most recently published piece of work, the Berylford Scandals, Sin and Secrecy, but obviously we're going to be dedicating bits and pieces of the programme to, well, me as a writer in general, isn't it? Well, at least that's what I've been given to understand. Well, obviously in the presenting chairs tonight are the actor and singer Aaron Hayes and our fellow podcaster James Boxall.
Thank you.
Hello there. So Dale, are you ready to be roasted and interrogated?
Always.
Good.
We should waterboard him, really, to get all the secrets out.
Oh my. Well, you can't be in the same room as me at the moment. Yes, no waterboarding allowed for now.
No.
James, would you like to start with a juicy question?
I was just going to say, so this is your second novel. You don't know when to quit, do you?
Is that a hint at something that I should be quitting, maybe?
I don't know, it's just an opener.
Yes. No, it's my second novel, but oddly enough, it's the one that I wrote first, so I sort of had an obligation to see it published, really.
Because wasn't it originally called Ridden with Sin, Ridden with Scandal?
It was indeed. That is true, yes. When I couldn't think of an actual... That was like the working title in the absence of anything better. And it underwent a fair few other incarnations with Sin and Scandal in there, until eventually I sort of settled on Sin and Secrecy.
I do recall one certain incarnation of it. There was a nice find and replace. So I'm just wondering, is there a special edition of Ridden with Penises coming out anytime soon with this book?
Oh, dear. No, unfortunately, the file for that, unless it still resides with another of our mutual friends and my fellow author and namesake, Dale Hall, unless he has a copy floating around his cloud, I think that has sunk into the annals of history forever.
Did you used to write it during classes at school?
No.
Oh, just in lunchtimes.
Just in lunchtimes. The story that originated Berylford as a place, though, that started at school. That was a piece of GCSE English coursework. Which even featured a favourite quote of yours, Aaron, as was your habit to shout at the year 8s out of the window, "Get off the courtyard." And I did manage to work that in there. That as well has been sort of lost to history, but I do hint at it in the first book, actually.
For those of us who just pretended to read the first book and can't remember what happened before they read this one, could you just set the scene, please?
Set the scene of which one? Which one do you want the scene?
Well, I guess the first one's public domain. So say what's happened, just refresh our minds and where we're heading into in the second book.
Well, in the first book, we are introduced to Berylford as a place, a market town in Hampshire, and in particular to the Virrington household. They are the resident aristocrats who live up at a big house, poorly staffed. They're not the richest of earldoms, sad to say. But yeah, we are introduced to Lady Olivera Virrington, a woman who has undergone her share of sorrow and despair. Her husband, her children, and most importantly, really, her staff, her 3 key servants in that book, plus her friends down in Berylford, and by extension, later on in the first book, we're introduced to Abel Sturkwhistle, her cousin, and his sister Rebecca, and Abel and Rebecca become central characters for the second novel.
What sort of mischief are they going to get up to in this novel?
Well, suffice it to say, one of them doesn't last very long.
That is quite big spoilers.
Oh yeah, sorry, we're meant to turn around.
The other one, the alternative title is The Scandalous Tale of Abel Sturkwhistle, so I'm going to guess he probably makes it past chapter 5.
Well, yeah, both of them do, actually. But, the other one, Rebecca doesn't last very long. Spoiler alert.
Just tell us the whole book.
Oh,
then. Yeah.
no. I may as well
He's
not read
already
it now.
spoiled his book.
Nonsense. It's a blip on a very long radar, believe me. It's only the tip of an iceberg for that. But yeah. And yeah, essentially this second novel follows several characters' journeys over the course of a year, but in terms of Abel's sort of linked to a lot of them, whether by allying himself with them or vice versa to sort of keep a secret of his own, or indeed amassing a long list of enemies as he sort of slowly, systematically tries to sort of take over Berylford. Meanwhile, Lady Virrington sort of succumbed to her grief a bit and has sort of stopped caring about virtually everything bar 2 or 3 people, really, and so we're sort of following her as well in terms of her development, because both of these characters, they were, you know, sort of young in the first book, and now we're 20 years later in this second novel, so they're in their dotage or approaching their dotage now.
Who inspired the 2 main characters? Or did anyone inspire them?
No, not anyone in particular. I guess they were sort of amalgamations of favourite literary characters of mine, but also with my own spins on it in terms of people that I knew, and I couldn't name names, but yeah.
Yeah, because you've often said J.K. Rowling was an inspiration for you, and we can see that in the lack of transsexual characters. And what other authors have inspired you?
Oh, dear me. We'll point out now that these stories are set in the Regency period, where I don't think transsexual characters would have been... They certainly would have been very unpopular. It wouldn't have been especially realistic to have them. But anyway.
They still existed, though.
I dare say they probably did, but they probably would have made it into freak shows and things like that,
Whoa.
I think.
Whoa!
That's not me being transphobic. That's me quoting
really-
history, darling.
You really do have a lot in common with J.K. Rowling.
Anyway, other authors. The main one is the immortal Charles Dickens, in terms of his, well, just his style, you know, his love of description, his sort of his rich use of language, his characters. There's such a vast array of characters, which I'm hoping, especially in this second book, people will sort of come to appreciate, that we've got such an array that it goes beyond the tropes of the standard gossipy little village, you know, that obviously, yeah, we have an ice cold aristocrat, we have the gossips, but we've got relentless and ruthless villains, we've got children who don't know when they know too much. I like to think that there's more variety in this book anyway than there is in Lust and Liberty.
Yeah, I can see also Jane Austen in the title. What's the third one going to be called?
Yes, no, that is it. That is true. It is a deliberate homage to Jane Austen, the titles. And in terms of this series, the Berylford, you know, if this was to be a trilogy, then the third book in the trilogy, which has been planned but not been written, would be Poison and Pursuit.
Is it a trilogy, or is it going to go on for
It will go on, but I mean, the next book that would be set in Berylford, which I don't plan to write for a little while, would be a standalone story. To be honest with you, I'm gonna sort of leave this series to sort of sink in for a little while, so working on my next novel, well, resuming work on my next novel pretty soon, but that won't be a Berylford story at all.
I'm looking forward to the next one. It sounds really good.
What is it?
The next novel, yes, that which Aaron has just alluded to, yeah, the next novel is a historical thriller set in 1943 in a hotel in Berlin called You Can Hear Chopin from the Attic, which I will talk about more later on in the podcast. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be turning my attentions to now, because I sort of started work on it after I'd finished Lust and Liberty and I'd been marketing that for a little while. A colleague of mine put it to me, he said, because I'd already started work on You Can Hear Chopin, and he said, right, well, you can either stand here and work on your new book, which is what I decided I wanted to do. I wanted to leave Berylford alone for a little while, but even though I had a draft of Sin and Secrecy sort of sitting there. So he said, yeah, you can work on your new book, or why don't you finish and revise and polish the second Berylford book, and, you know, by the end of the year you could have 2 books out. The logic of which made sense in the end, and so that's what I ultimately decided to do. It took far longer than I planned, bearing in mind that conversation was in February 2019. I said I wanted to have it out by Christmas, and it came out in June. of this year. So yeah, it did take a lot longer than I planned, but that's because I took out a lot, I changed a lot around, I blended some characters. Some characters were meant to do some things and I gave those jobs to other people. I invented new relationships, new enmities, new alliances, sort of to make it all flow as one nice sort of fluent story where everything was connected.
Yeah, have you proofread this one?
Yes, I have proofread this one.
Good, just checking.
I did proofread the last one as well, just apparently not well enough, because things definitely slipped under the radar.
We'll be sure to find any typos, don't worry.
Yes, please do let me know, of course, because, as I say, I mean, I read through Lust and Liberty 3 times, and I've read through Sin and Secrecy what must be about 6 times, including one where Microsoft Word actually read it to me. I've got, like, the read aloud function, and it actually read it word for word to me. Part of the problem is when you've been looking at a piece of work for as long as I have, and you know, with this book it was nearly 12 years reading through it continually, eventually I don't think your eyes actually see what is actually there. I think they see what they think is there, and so having the computer read it to you itself, you know, it will highlight if something sounds wrong to your ears rather than to your eyes. So yeah, I'm hoping that at least for the most part that I wheedled out any errors that I may have missed.
I liked when you said, I think it might have been on the podcast or you wrote it down somewhere, that your father used to watch you write and he was just amazed at how much you could write, and you just kept writing and writing.
Oh no, that's on the dedication page, Aaron.
Oh right, that's right, that's where I read it.
You've only read that since yesterday, because that's when I delivered it to you.
There you go, that's where I read it.
Another thing I liked on the podcast is when you said you donate all the profits from this book to charities. So which charity is it going to?
I didn't say I was going to do that. I said I was going to donate some copies to Bournemouth Hospital and to Alder Road Sainsbury's to go to some of the key workers as a sort of thank you, because I definitely won't be able to afford to give it all away, because this is supposed to be mortgage money.
Why does have higher dedication than me and Aaron?
What's this group called at the top?
The Scholars?
Yeah, what's that all about?
Well, that's an inside joke, I suppose you could call it, and it was something that started at the beginning of lockdown, where myself and a group of friends were convening every Saturday for a virtual pub, and in one of the earlier sessions, I think it was when we first did a virtual quiz, it became a sort of recurring phrase, oh, that's one for the Scholars. And so thereafter, that group sort of became known as the Scholars, and so I thought I would dedicate the book to the Scholars.
No dedication to Bournemouth Backchat. Hey, Aaron, outrageous.
Look, your names are on the bloody list, all right?
Speaking of Scholars, what wisdom have you imparted in this book? What lessons will people take reading this book? You know, you've got to learn something, surely.
Well, I hope that people will learn the importance of family and how you should appreciate family, the togetherness of family, and not to sort of fight with them, don't run from them, because you only get one. And that's a message that I'm hoping people will take away. But also, it is a lesson in lying and keeping secrets and stuff like that, that it really is not a healthy thing. You can drive yourself mad. Shouldn't hold on to anger or hate.
That's a good lesson. Your books are titled Lust and Liberty and Sin and Secrecy. Have you had much experience of these in your life?
Oh, too much. Too much of all of them.
So, reading some of the sex scenes in book 1, I would question that. Let me find one of the lines.
Here we go.
She reached down and found his prick hard and throbbing. He hissed as she handled it. It's like what? like a snake?
It's more like it's more of an inward sound than an outward sound. But I was hoping people would understand what that meant.
Like that.
Pardon?
Like ooh, like an ooh.
Well, that's not a hiss, is it?
Yeah, but a hiss is like.
Or a.
If someone did grab my willy, you know, probably wouldn't do that, would I?
Well, I didn't write the scene with you in mind.
I should
Wait,
think not.
do they call you the Snake, Dale?
Yes, but not for that reason.
The
He
hisser.
began to thrust harder and faster, and her moaning began to reach a crescendo. I swear I've heard that line before from some of Aaron's erotic poetry.
Yeah, that might be
Plagiarism.
that might have been slightly inspired by memories of that particular piece of poetry, yes.
What was it about Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber that excited you so much?
The imagery, you know, that was, you know, it's highly descriptive. I like descriptive prose, as you may or may not have been able to tell. That's why I like Dickens so much. That's why I like Angela Carter so much, because, you know, it's very rich and very vivid. Even something as darkly macabre as her short story, The Snow Child. You know, it's so raw. There's no airs and graces about it at all. He got down off of his horse, thrust his virile member into the body of the dead girl. I mean, you know,
And that spoke to you, and that inspired you.
well, yes, I suppose it did, because as I say, there's
Whoa.
no romanticism about it at all. There's no airy fairy. It's just it tells it how it is. It's like George R.R. Martin. I think someone said to me, they were comparing him to Tolkien. And Tolkien was a poet and a linguist, and he, you know, everything's very romantic and poetic and sort of drawn out, and in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and everything, whereas George R.R. Martin in his books it's very to the point. Obviously, I mean, James, you've read the
Have you
books.
read the fourth book?
I haven't read the fourth book, no.
The first three books are to the point, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean, you know. I mean, much as there's a lot of sort of detail and characterization involved, I mean, it's like with Dickens. I mean, you can spend about 5 pages just talking about the carpet and who it belonged to before it ended up in that house and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, I don't think George R.R. Martin would bother even to mention the carpet.
Do you like carpet, or do you go straight to the
Don't
point?
believe I've mentioned a carpet in this book.
Yes, but do you over-describe?
I wouldn't
Or
say
do you-
over-describe, because I think in this day and age, people, you know, you
Don't
have
have
to draw a line.
patience.
You have to draw a line for your audience, otherwise you're going to lose them.
So you tailored it a bit to today's audience, and I do agree that, yeah, like reading Lord of the Rings, if there's like 2 pages of poem, I just wouldn't read it. I'd just skip the page. But tailoring to today's audience, in 18th century Hampshire, I see there's no black characters, Dale, so how long have you been a racist?
Again, it was being true to history.
What, there weren't black people?
There were black people, but they would have been slaves in those days, and if they weren't, then there would certainly have been, you know, a hell of a prejudice. You know, they wouldn't have been accepted in society like that. I mean, you think about it, slavery was abolished in 1833. Sin and Secrecy is set in 1815 at its latest point. So, yeah.
Are there any slaves?
No. I think the only people who would be rich enough to own slaves would be Lady Verrington herself, but she would, you know, as I said earlier, the earldom's quite poor. They don't have
Well, it would
actually
have
the
been
money.
cheaper to have a slave, because then they wouldn't have to pay wages.
Well, if as and when you read the book, you'll understand why she prefers to keep her servants rather than, you know, anything else. But yeah, no, I thought slavery, there was no sense really, especially in light of recent events, to breathe further life into that part of history.
What interests you so much about the dark side of people's characters?
Oh, that is a good question. It's so much more interesting in general, you know. I mean, I suppose there's an aspect of not knowing where people's limits are. There's an air of mystery, I suppose, in terms of how far people are willing to go to achieve their ends or to protect people. There's an unpredictability about it, which I like, I guess, and to sort of explore that, you know, it's taking you on a journey. You have actually no idea where it's going to end up, but it's going to be exciting anyway.
Have you ever felt the urge to murder someone?
No, not
good.
not literally. Anyway, I suppose.
Not without your leather gloves on.
If I'm going to commit any crime, I'm going to do it with leather gloves on. No fingerprints, is it?
True. Could you tell us a sinful secret you have never told anyone?
Well, the point about it is that it's a secret, so...
Ah, okay.
Can you tell us a non-secret sin that you have committed?
Oh, yeah. I am repeatedly guilty of the sin of gluttony. I eat way too much, and I drink way too much.
That's all right. You're a writer.
Do you have a character that you see is yourself, a gluttonous pig, in the novel?
Ouch!
You just said it! Come on!
I have reflected in both Abel Sturkwhistle and Lady Virrington. They are both food lovers. There's a passage towards the end of the book, which is... I mean, a lot of the characters are sort of big drinkers, big eaters. I'll only read the passage as is relevant because I don't want to give too much away. This is about Abel Sturkwhistle. He had taken note of the date, 29th of September, and was conscious of his 59th birthday in 2 days' time. In his earlier years, this would have been an occasion extravagantly celebrated. Revels at all four corners of Iverley Warren, with nobles, politicians, and other august personages of his acquaintance united together in one decadent, opulent bacchanalian banquet that would last for days. A spread of food constructed and executed by a regiment of French cooks that would make the banquet table at Lady Virrington's Victory Ball look like a servant's supper. The best brands of cigar imported in from the finest purveyors in the Indies, and fountains flowing purple and gold with wine and champagne. And then beautiful women, music, dancing, all the pleasures in which Abel took exceptional delectation.
Very nice.
Any particular passages you want to read for us, other than that one?
Other than that
Get us
one.
hooked.
Give us a taste. Give us some action. You know?
Give you some action. Right.
Some juice.
Yeah. You've already told us who dies, so...
Yeah, okay, well, this one's quite fun then. I had to read this to a couple of fans the other night, actually, when I was video chatting with friends of mine. One of them was staying at home with his mother, and his mother's a big fan. They specifically asked for chapter 11, so I'm going to read you a piece from chapter 11. And this is Abel, having discovered his sister dead. He's going back to Beryl Court to speak to Lady Virrington. At Beryl Court, the Whitlocks were both in the process of clearing the dining table. The Countess was in the sitting room with a glass of sherry in a pensive state, as she did habitually. She and her servants were all immediately disturbed when the door-knockers loudly sounded in an exigent and persistent manner. Lady Virrington's head bolted upright, though she stayed seated. Her fingers were clutching the arms of her armchair, poised to raise her rheumatic self to her feet. Meanwhile, Whitlock had appeared in the archway leading to the dining-room. From the sitting-room, "My lady," he awaited instruction from his mistress. "Go and answer it, Whitlock," she returned, managing with a struggle to stand up. The banging on the door continued. "At least for the sake of some peace," the Countess went on. "If they're brigands or burglars, they're not being very subtle about it." She went to the fire and picked up the poker, indicating to Whitlock to go out into the hallway. The butler did as he was bid, while his mistress followed with her weapon clasped in her talon-like hand. She lingered in the doorway to the sitting-room, watching as Whitlock finally answered the knocks. "Do you know what?" he began in faux exasperation, before exclaiming suddenly as he realised the person at the door. "Abel? What the devil?" The sunken old man emerged into view. "What did you just call him?" was Lady Virrington's sharp squawk upon hearing the informal way her butler had addressed their guest. "Whitlock, kindly go back and attend to the dining-room with your wife." "Olivera, please, let him be for the moment," Abel commanded. "What are you doing with that?" He pointed at the poker she was holding. "Is to protect myself with, of course," she snapped in response. "We've already had one thing stolen from the house tonight. I feared they may have returned to finish the job." And Abel then presented the silver candlestick before the Countess, whose eyes widened upon seeing it. "And how did you come by that?" she asked him. "How did you even—" "My sister is dead," Abel stated. Lady Virrington at once dropped the poker, which resounded off the floor with a loud clatter. Her eyes remained white with sheer shock. "What?" she gasped, her voice so hoarse and quavering it was scarcely audible. "And here you behold the murder weapon." "I'm sorry, murder." Lady Virrington was still very much stunned. "Miss Rebecca is dead, and by another's hand." "Indeed," returned Abel placidly. "So I ask you, was she alive when you left the house earlier?" In a fraction of a second the Countess clouted Abel across the face. The sound of the impact echoed through the hallway. Whitlock, who had watched it happen, remained stiff, astounded that Lady Virrington had even attempted to do such a thing. "Ask me that again, Abel," she murmured at her cousin. "I dare you." Forgive me, Olivera, but I had to. Did you? Did you really? The Countess was unsympathetic and incensed. Are you not forgetting that that candelabrum was stolen after I had left the house?
Ooh.
Well.
Dum dum dum.
Do we find out who done it?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Good.
So it's a bit of a murder mystery.
Yes, oh, yeah, no, it's murder and mayhem from pretty much the... Well, not quite the word go, but, yeah, quite early on in.
How many people die in the...
I can tell you that because I keep a list.
What's the death count?
Yeah, this one has a slightly higher body count than Lust and Liberty. 11.
Oh, it's like
11? Wow. I wouldn't live in Berylford. That sounds...
One of
dangerous.
them, one of them is, well, off-screen, I suppose you could call it. So 10 actually we witness, and one of them is off-screen. But they're all major characters, so that's fun.
Do you think they'd have Beryl bikes in Berylford?
Well, I think it would. I mean, it follows that so they should really, shouldn't they? I mean, obviously we'd need to wait for the bicycle to get invented. They don't come along for a little while afterwards, but yeah, the big penny farthing ones.
They might have nicked the name off your book.
I highly doubt it.
Who did you nick the name off for Berylford?
Do you know, I don't actually know what inspired it, the actual name. Again, it was when we were doing GCSE English. I suppose I must have just thought of the first sort of name that came to my head, and just attached Ford on the end of it to make it sound like a traditional English village. Beryl is a type of quartz. So in the backstory now, which we don't hear in this book, but it's just in case I ever do use it, beryl is a type of quartz. So I imagine that it must have been named after the ford at which they found a lot of beryl quartz, and so the town became known as Berylford thereafter. But yeah, that isn't actually what inspired it. I couldn't tell you.
Whereabouts in Hampshire is Berylford?
It's in the Test Valley, so it's where that's where Andover is. So it's about an hour away, and yeah, an hour 45 minutes away from Southampton.
Have you visited?
Andover is where my mum's from.
So what other places nearby are there? Picket Peace, Goodworth, Clatford.
Yeah, we don't mention other than Andover, and we do go to Andover, but we don't actually sort of explore the town. It's where the court is, and it's where the legal offices are. But we do go to one of Berylford's fictional neighbours for a chapter, which is Wraxhill on the Test, which is actually based on Christchurch.
Okay. Are any other places in the book?
Actually, in the book, we do spend a few chapters in London, because there's a segment where all the socialites in the cast, they all go for a night at the opera. To tell you the circumstances for doing so would give certain stuff away. But yeah, no, we do go to London, we do go to Andover, and we do go to Wraxhill. That's our Christchurch equivalent.
Would they be the filming locations if it was to be turned into a feature film?
I'd like to think so, at least to Christchurch anyway, yeah, because there's the priory and everything has been included there and stuff, so yeah, I'd like to think it would be a good place to turn into it, for sure.
Can I have a part?
Can you
A
have
speaking
a part? A speaking part. To be honest with you, I think there would be a good... I mean, you might be a little old, but we might be able to get away with it. There is a character that I think you could feasibly play, which is quite a main role. But again, I mean, he's only 18, so they'd have to age you down. There would be a place for you somewhere. There'd have to be a place for you somewhere.
Would I get in?
I think we'd probably find a place for you as well, yeah.
You said in the second book the lead character, Abel's wife, is somewhat based on me. What traits do we share?
I'm just trying to think now. Because she's in the first book as well, but she's quite meek and, quite quiet. I suppose quiet is probably something that you share, because you are quite sort of quiet, and you don't generally speak unless spoken to in social situations, I've sort of noticed.
Maybe in the past.
But yeah.
Am I in the book?
No, I'm afraid not. There was
that's
not to say you won't be in future ones.
Okay.
I'll write a novel about you, James.
Oh look, his ego's big enough as it is.
How good are you at keeping secrets, or are you a big old gossip?
Who, me? Oh, I'm a terrible gossip. People deliberately don't tell me things because they know I won't be able to keep it a secret.
I've got a silly question.
A silly question?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's no such thing as a silly question, so have at me.
Did you get horny writing the sex scenes?
Oh, for goodness sake.
As you type the word prick, did you hiss?
No, I did not, Aaron, asking me such a thing. That's not a silly question.
Well, you know, I don't know. Maybe you need to write the scene. I don't know.
You don't want a dull, passionless sex scene?
No, I did not. I maintained complete self-control, thank you very much.
This is a quote by George Orwell. All writers are vain, selfish, and lazy, and at the very bottom of their motives lies a mystery. Writing a book is a long, exhausting struggle, like a long bout of some painful illness. One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven by some demon whom one can neither resist nor understand. Do you agree?
Vain? Yeah, I get that. Selfish? Takes a lot for me to be selfish, but I can do it. And lazy? No. Whereas being driven by demons, oh yes, that I do agree with. Writing for a lot of people, I think, is a form of escapism and expressing one's deeper emotions. I think I said it before about you can pour in your most euphoric sentiments, your most atrocious prejudices, and your most bitter regrets, as has been seen in the work of several famed writers. Roald Dahl was a terrible, self-confessed anti-Semite who suffered at the hands of several boarding school sort of teachers and, well, adults in general, and that's why in a lot of his stories adults generally meet quite grisly ends and punishments and whatnot, you know. Whereas Stieg Larsson, who wrote the books The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and the Millennium series, it's called in total, his lead character, Lisbeth Salander, was partly inspired by a girl who he knew who got gang raped, and he was in a position to intervene and he did not. So apparently he poured in all his regrets about that into creating that character. So with me it was my grief, I think. It was grief that compelled me to write. Certainly Lust and Liberty anyway, and I couldn't tell you what demons really. I mean, I think it was just hatred of school and a desire to get out. There was me and my 15-year-old self thinking, oh, if I write and finish this novel, I'm going to get it published, I'm going to be rich, and I can leave school early. Of course, obviously it doesn't work like that. That's not how life works. But yeah.
It's a good plan, though.
It was driven by a desire to escape.
Well, that's interesting.
Do you have any questions pertaining to the new book that I will be resuming work on pretty soon?
What is the new book?
So as I mentioned earlier on in the programme, the new book is called You Can Hear Chopin from the Attic. It's a thriller set in a Berlin hotel right in the middle of the Second World War. Let me find you the synopsis. You Can Hear Chopin from the Attic is the story of Heinrich Oeynhausen, a young hotelier, Nazi Party member, husband, brother, employer and protector, and Cordelia Nasebeck, a journalist. A tale of secrecy and salvation, of brotherhood and betrayal. While the hotelier wants to keep his business as mundane and peaceful as possible, the journalist quickly makes a nuisance of herself by eavesdropping and snooping. One of her discoveries is the catalyst for their unlikely alliance, but Heinrich is protecting not just one but two secrets. His 19-year-old wife Sophie he is forced to keep hidden from the world, as she is mentally ill and a target of the Nazis, including Heinrich's benefactor and family friend Standartenführer Upfauer. Sophie's psychosis is pacified solely by music from above, provided by a different kind of guest, the elderly Itzhak Zilberman, a Polish Jew who is consigned to a hidden attic annex to play Chopin for the sake of his own life.
Oh, that sounds brilliant.
So it primarily deals with, well, two issues pertaining to the Second World War, which are largely unexplored in sort of artistic form. The first of which being the Nazi Party's persecution of the mentally ill. There was a rumour that even, and I think it was actually confirmed, in fact, that Hitler gassed one of his own cousins. One of his own cousins was mentally ill and did die under the Reich's regime. She was gassed in one of these, well, inverted commas, hospitals. And the other being how hotels were still required to sort of run virtually as normal. During the Second World War, Hitler was a frequenter of a number of hotels across Germany. But yeah, no, as to actually how they ran and what they had to deal with, and how they kept themselves in good ingredients for food and stuff like that, that's all sort of largely unexplored. So it's been very interesting to not only write but to research as well.
Yeah, I expect so. Do you listen to a lot of Chopin?
Yes, I do. Chopin's one of my all-time favourite classical composers.
Did your experience in hotels come into it?
Yes. Because obviously, I mean, you can tell probably from the synopsis that I just read you, it's going to be quite a heavy story, but I've tried to sort of include a bit of, well, not comedy per se, but more light-hearted conversation as well, in a way that modern readers, especially those who work in hotels and the hospitality industry, will be able to relate. And there is I don't know if I wrote it down, but anyway, it was when I was working in a hotel last year. One of my managers, he came up to me, he said to me, "Oh, I've got some good news and some bad news." And I said, what's the bad news first? And he said, "Oh, right, well, the golfing party we've got in, they're not going out for dinner tonight." And I said, "Okay, well, what's the good news then?" And he said, "Well, that means they're coming to stay here with us and we get more money." And I turned around to him and I said, "Well, that's not good news and bad news. That's bad news and worse news if you're my side of the bar, because it means that they're going to all come in here and bother me." So I've worked that in there. But yeah, things like guests not being clever enough to use the elevator properly, or that was it, yeah, she'd wedged the door open and the lift can't move while the door's open, and I explained that to the woman and she said to me, "Well, how can I close it when I'm in here?" Which I had to sort of struggle to understand the lack of common sense. I hadn't been working in hotels very long on this particular encounter. She was stood in the lift. How can I close the door when I'm in the lift? It didn't make a blind bit of sense to me. But yeah, so I've sort of written it with a mind to sort of suggest that the customers are the villains here. But anyway, yeah, so it's going to be an interesting one to write and hopefully to read as well. That's the one that I'm thinking maybe we won't go down the self-publishing route. Maybe we will sort of polish it to a quality where we could pitch it to literary agents and to publishing companies and actually get it done properly.
So you're saying this new book's a bit of a joke, but the next one, that's the one.
Not a bit of a joke. I'm hoping that people are going to read it and enjoy it a lot more than they enjoyed the first one, which, for a lot of people, they did enjoy it. Or so they tell me, anyway.
New one's bigger and better.
New one's bigger and better, anyway, and so when I come around to doing the third one, doing this new one, You Can Hear Chopin, I'm hoping that that's going to be even bigger and even better.
I think it could be a game changer.
I'm so glad you think so. Would you read it, James?
Of course. If I got through Lost in Liberty, I can get through anything.
Thank you.
I have a very short question. Why should I read your book?
Why should you read Sin and Secrecy? If not for more of, the scandalous goings-on in Berylford, it's got something for everyone in there, I think. There is a lot less romance involved than the last book, which I personally think is to its benefit. I realised it when I was writing it down, actually, when we first sort of announced that it was out. But there is a lot of things that it draws feasible parallels to Game of Thrones, not on purpose, just inadvertently, in terms of you have warring siblings, murder in the night, children who know too much, miscarriages of justice, and families longing to be reunited. And so I think there are several reasons, just in that short description, why you should sort of read the book. It's more thrills and less frills, as it were. So I think, especially for the male reader anyway, I think there's much more for the male reader in here.
This is a lad's book.
Yeah.
Lad's Bible. I'll read it anyway because I'm a good friend and I've got my name in the dedications this time. So
yes.
That's good.
Yes.
That was definitely just an inadvertent slip, that last one, but whoops.
No, don't worry. That all sounds good. I'm going to dive straight in with a cup of tea.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Read us the last page.
If I read you the last page, I'm going to give away the answer to the mystery.
Read us the last word.
Oh, the last word? Forever. The last word
dear.
is forever.
Oh, that's good last word. It says here printed in Poland. Why did you choose Poland?
I didn't choose Poland. That's where Amazon chooses it to get printed.
Ah, okay. Alan Partridge, for his books, has a soundtrack to go with them. Sort of suggested songs that you could listen to whilst reading it.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything you would suggest?
That's interesting. Well, most of it would be classical, because obviously it's old-fashioned, like me, and bits of Les Miserables as well. I think you could get away with a bit of that.
Sounds good.
I'm just looking at your chapter titles. I'm trying to find a good one.
Oh, yeah.
An interview with Ebenezer. Is that Ebenezer Scrooge?
No, and I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because obviously, Ebenezer is actually a biblical figure. I couldn't tell you to what end, but yeah, that is where the name comes from. It is a biblical name. But we always, because of, obviously, the immortal A Christmas Carol, we always establish that Ebenezer is a name for an old man. So I tried to turn that on its head for this book, and I've actually made... he is a very main character in this story, Ebenezer Devonshire by name.
He's Berylford's Rag and Bone Man.
He is Berylford's Rag and Bone Man, and he is 22 and, you know, quite sort of young, strapping gentleman, really. He's not influenced by Ebenezer Scrooge at all, really, but, you know, he can be a bit uncharitable at times, but he recognises it sort of quite immediately and sort of strives to make the changes when he realises, you know, harm is being done by them. It doesn't take several supernatural visitations to make him realise that, you know. But yeah, he undergoes quite a bit of development in the story, I like to think, and so yeah, I'm hoping that people will come to realise that there is more than one Ebenezer in literature, and this one isn't a miserable old man, so...
You're doing it for the Ebenezers out there.
Yes, the handful that they are. Yeah, no, that particular chapter, that is a pivotal moment already that you've found.
Ooh, let's go straight to that chapter then.
Well, obviously you've got to read everything that goes before it, otherwise you won't understand what they're talking about.
Oh, alright. What shall I drink whilst reading it?
Either something warming, like a cup of tea, as you say, or something sort of short. It's not a cocktaily sort of book, it's a glass of port and a bit of cheese kind of book, I like to think.
Oh,
apart from when we go to the ball, and then you can drink whatever extravagant things that you can think of. I made sure that there was a ball in here, because the last book didn't. There's a short party. There's a couple of chapters dedicated to a party, but this is an actual ball, a belated ball to celebrate Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo.
Whoa! Spoilers.
Is it a sort of ball you'd wear a feather boa to?
I don't think they had feather boas back then.
Ah.
But I mean, yeah, give it a try. They might look at you a bit funny, but yeah. And that's a long chapter as well. I think that's like over 20 pages long, that particular chapter. But it's a pivotal moment, and it sort of ties up all the many, or if not all of the subplots sort of together, and then from there we all sort of edge towards the end. So yeah, I had a lot of fun writing that particular chapter. That took a while, obviously, but because it was new, it was fun.
That's sort of your natural environment, is parties and balls.
Yeah, parties, balls, lots of good food. If ever I could accuse myself of over-describing something, I think it might well have been in terms of describing all the food that was laid on at that particular party, but which in turn was based off a trip to... it was actually a real-life menu that was held at a party, a royal party, I think, at Brighton Pavilion. So there's little bits of non-fiction in there.
That's what I like.
I thought you might.
I have the last question.
You do?
If I wanted to read your book, how would I procure it? Or should I just torrent it? I don't know.
I wouldn't know how you would torrent it, but...
Well, someone could upload the Kindle file. Yeah.
I could just take pictures of every page.
Yeah. I might just copy it, retype it up.
Why would you do that?
Well, how else would I get the book?
Well, you can get the book via Amazon in both paperback and on Kindle. I mean, if not for the gorgeous cover, then actually for the pleasure of turning the pages yourself, get the paperback version.
You do get more money on the paperback. I was going to say the Kindle is so much cheaper. I don't know why you don't make the Kindle slightly more. But
well, primarily because I was going off of market research, really, when pricing the Kindle version.
You make the Kindle a $5, double your money.
It struck me as a little bit too expensive, really, but...
I just tried Googling the Berylford Scandals, and it comes up straight away. So you can just do that.
Well, there you are, you see. And you know, I think that if you type in Dale Hurst into Google, I think it comes up with more me rather than a B&B in Devon, which is what it used to, or that it was the Dale Hurst guest house, and Dale Hurst is all one word. And there's a B&B in Devon. And as soon as COVID's up, I might take a little trip down there just to say, well, just to see if they think I'm joking when I say my name's Dale Hurst.
There's Berylford in Canada.
Is there?
Yes, Berylford Primary School. So you should sue this school because they're using your name.
Or maybe I could visit that school and do something rewarding.
But there's a space. It's Beryl space Ford. I think you should mark your territory. Yeah.
Don't go there and pee in the bushes.
What did you think of the cover, guys? I wanted to have your opinion on that.
I really like the cover.
My new illustrator, it's not the same illustrator. The gentleman behind this new cover is a gentleman called Michał Musiałek.
Did you fire the other guy?
No, Michał offered to do it for a fraction of the price. And, well, I mean, you can see the results in your hands, really.
I think I prefer this cover
Oh,
to the
well.
last one. I mean, they're both good.
They're both similar, but yeah, they're also both good. Is the Dale Hurst font the same? Yes,
should be.
Just about.
Yeah,
I think the new book is maybe half a pixel bigger in font.
Might be, I don't know. Because I wasn't involved in like the font sizing and things, I just sort of sent it over to the designer and he did the rest. But I am so glad you like it, though. I mean, it was similar on purpose. I did ask him to sort of take inspiration from the last one, but whereas Lust and Liberty is very blue and black, I wanted Sin and Secrecy to be primarily red. Hence why it is red.
I feel it invites you in.
Yes, it's a very warming scene out on the front. I mean, I shouldn't probably say this really, but what happens in the room that it depicts isn't particularly warm and inviting, but hey ho.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to hearing what you guys have to think about it. As I say, a couple of people, they've already started reading it and are loving it already. I mean, my nan started reading it as soon as I handed it to her when it came in the post. I mean, she did spend quite a long time reading down the list of names of the dedications, I suppose, trying to make sure that she got a mention.
I'm going to read it when I finish my book.
Of course. Yes, exactly. I mean,
It should be soon.
There is no time limit on it at all. But the people that have started reading it, they've said they're already loving it, which is very flattering, and we can but hope that it will stay that way. I haven't heard any bad things about it, which is or about Lust and Liberty either. I mean, we're still at 5 stars on Amazon, which is always nice.
Mm.
You should get some for your next Chopin book. I don't know how it works, if you have to send your book to a newspaper first, but you know, like they have quotes on the front.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we'd have to send them off for review. I mean, there's a reason I haven't done that for these two, is because I suppose I didn't have quite as much faith that the reviewers would be kind, but I'm hoping that
Please buy this book.
Please buy this book. Don't listen to the critics. Now, I've been learning more and more that you shouldn't always trust the reviews of films, books, etc. I mean, Jaws, for example, we all know Jaws as a film, but when it came out, I think it was only a year or so before it was made into a film, actually, Jaws, when it was released in its original novel form. Yeah, 1974. You know, the critics hated it. They didn't like the characters at all. They made a fantastic film out of it, and it became a bestseller, so You know, I always say to myself now, regardless of the feedback you get, don't take it as gospel, because someone else will read it and they might love it. And it's the people who love it that you want to please at the end of the day. So...
Yeah, Alan Partridge puts, like, joke quotes on the front. There's one saying, "You could skip every other page and still know what's going on." And there's another one, "Man of the Moment, TV Magazine, 1995.
Alright then, well, would you like me to conclude with a passage of some description from one or the other books?
Yes.
Nah.
No. Okay.
No, do it, go on.
Well, no, I hadn't chosen one. I was hoping that you guys were going to request something.
What if we flick to a page and you have to read that page?
Okay,
Give a page number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to read it.
Page number...
69.
Page 69 of the new book.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay, so page 69 of the new book is... Oh, it's at the inquest into the death of Miss Rebecca Stirkwhistle. So, "I had a quarrel with Mrs. Stirkwhistle and dismissed her from the house overnight," Abel began to explain. "Rebecca pursued and attended to her. After that she returned to the house. We spoke briefly—" "About what?" Mr. Baxter interjected, placing no value in framing his questions delicately. Abel exhaled deeply, not taking kindly to being interrupted, but also remembering that in the presence of the coroner he was obliged to be respectful. "Some unrelated domestic matter," was his answer as he stifled his indignation. "And immediately following that I left the house to attend a dinner engagement with my cousin, Lady Olivia Virrington," and he pointed out the Countess among the other witnesses. She looked horrified that he had done so, and she shuffled uncomfortably in her seat. "I bumped into her ladyship as I was leaving the house," Abel went on. "She was on her way to speak to Rebecca about something. You can ask her about that yourself." "I know I can," retorted Mr. Baxter. "You did not follow Lady Virrington into your house?" "On her ladyship's insistence," returned Abel. "She said it was a matter on account of which I need not delay. So I continued to Beryl Court, and I was received by Mr. Whitlock, the butler there." Mr. Baxter's sallow eyes deviated from Abel to Lady Virrington, who felt their cold and pallid gaze settle upon her skin like two slimy frogs. "So I'm to understand, Mr. Stirkwhistle, that as it stands you were not the last person to see your sister alive?" Mr. Baxter said, still staring at the Countess. "That position would fall to Lady Virrington." "With all due respect, Mr. Coroner, your honour," "With all due respect, your honour, I would say that position would fall to my sister's killer," said Abel in an impudent attempt to be clever, an attempt not appreciated by Mr. Baxter. "If indeed the two are mutually exclusive," he hissed. "I beg your pardon," Lady Virrington cried down from below. "Silence in court," Mr. Baxter countered sharply. There were gasps from the gallery. Mrs. Ermstone looked nigh to standing up in protest and outrage. Mrs. Hathersage was whispering in her ear, clearly trying to pacify her.
When he hissed, did someone grab his cock?
"Oh, for goodness sake. You're never going to let me live that down, are you?"
Ah, no.